Okay, we are now live coming to you from both Barcelona, Spain. And where are you now, Derek, in DC?
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. I would love to be in Barcelona, Spain, though.
All right, well, we have hot tapas and cold beer and sangria waiting for you anytime you get here.
All right, I'll let you know.
All righty. Derek, I wanted to give you the chance to properly introduce myself. I've been following you and Chris and your Black Swan team for quite a while, and I really love your approach of how to deal and to diffuse situations that are highly, intensified, and always looking for, I think, the most evolved and smartest solution. But in particular, I'd love to get a little bit into your history with using, I guess, your background in negotiations and how they're applied on a day-to-day business life. Can I ask you to go ahead and introduce yourself here?
Sure. As the screen said, my name is Derek Gaunt. I'm one of the instructors and coaches at the Black Swan Group, blackswanltd.com. Also, as you noticed there, the author of Ego, Authority, Failure. Interpersonal communication skills. That's been something that's put wind in my sails, if you will, for the better part of my adult life. And it's no secret that the techniques that we espouse at the Black Swan Group are derivations of what we learned as hostage and crisis and kidnap negotiators at the state, local, and federal levels. I started my law enforcement career in '88, became a hostage negotiator in '97. Team leader in 2001, team commander in 2004, and that's a position I held up until the time that I left for good in 2017. Now, I became a part of the Black Swan Group in 2010 as a contract employee, where let me back up. In 2000 is when I first met Chris Voss. Chris Voss, for those who are unaware, is the CEO and founder of the Black Swan Group. He is a former FBI negotiator. He was a lead kidnap negotiator for the crisis negotiation unit, which meant that if you were an American who got snatched overseas, Chris was going to be a part of the group that was going to try to get you back. He and I became fast friends in 2000 when he moved to the Washington, D.C. area. We got introduced by a mutual friend, and the rest, as they say, is history. And so as a part of the Black Swan Group, it's given me the opportunity to travel all over the globe, teaching hostage negotiations practices and principles to people in the private sector, corporations, as well as individuals, improving their interpersonal communication skills so that they can increase their rate of influence in moving people in the direction that we need them to go. And it's been a whirlwind journey. I'm excited because I get to meet cool people like yourself and discover how much more of the world there is out there outside of my wheelhouse, which was law enforcement.
You said that's a fascinating life. It's got to be stressful. You got to be extremely effective in being able to calm your nerves in a very difficult situation. Is there anything that we can talk about or we're not supposed to discuss today?
No, free game.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I come across, Derek, is I work a lot with the startup community. And one of the things I was looking to see how the skills that you provide and the techniques can be applied towards business, and particularly in terms of sales negotiation. And one of the things that I see a lot of people failing is when they're asking for capital. And I think I've seen a segment where you were working about like the power of the ask or the power of asking effectively. I don't know if this involves, sequential statements, but I don't know if you can talk a little bit about how asking for something is a really important part of your negotiation skills in terms of hostage situations, or maybe a hostage situation of your own company. Can you talk a little bit about the power of asking?
Yeah, well, you mentioned sequencing, and that's really should be top of mind when you're going to ask. And sequencing the conversation just means, generally speaking, it's always going to be tactical empathy first. Your goal, your objective, your ask will always come last. In
Tactical
hostage
empathy first.
it's got to be tactical empathy first. So you've got to demonstrate for your counterpart that you understand the lay of the land from their perspective first.
Okay.
I say do it first for many different reasons, but none larger than tactical empathy encourages reciprocity. You see, we all have an innate desire to have someone else understand what we're going through, what our environment looks like. And when that need is satisfied, there's a lot of negative emotions and dynamics that you clear up out of their brain almost instantly. And it feels so good that they are subconsciously obligated to return the favor when you ultimately get to your ask. Many people get this sequencing backwards. We want to go into the room and we want to throw all of our data and information on the table. We're going to make our presentation. We're going to do our pitch. And then we're going to follow that up with our ask. And then we get pushback from the other side and we're going, why is that? The information is all there. It's clear why we're asking for it, why this is reasonable, and yet we're getting pushback. And you're getting that pushback because you haven't first taken the time to demonstrate for them that you understand their perspective. And notice I use the word demonstrate that you understand their perspective. This is not saying you understand their perspective. This goes beyond I understand. This goes beyond I get it. This is you articulating the motivations and the circumstances of the other side. If you can't articulate that to me, then you have not shown me that you understand my worldview. You don't understand my worldview. You don't understand me. You don't understand me. Meaningful dialogue is not going to take place. So it's all a matter of demonstrating for the other side that you understand where they're coming from and how this conversation, how this environment is going to impact them. When I call inside, I'm sorry.
Sorry, is this also part of like when you're talking about dealing with negative emotions? Because if they come in with certain expectations and you start to disarm them by showing them that you're actually trying to understand where they're coming from first, so you get all of that, a significant part of that, I guess, doubts that they may have about your intentions out of the way.
About your intentions, about the realities of the environment. For example, in your line of work, you hear objections repeatedly. Many of those objections are the same objections. So in each subsequent conversation with anyone, those objections should be a part of your, we call them accusations audits, where we are preemptively or proactively labeling the negative emotions and dynamics that the other side probably is thinking about us, thinking about who I represent, thinking about the conversation. And I start most conversations with the accusations audit because I want to clear up those negatives. I want to take permission and authority away from them from using those negatives against me during the course of the conversation. And so I'm going to start off with, this is probably the last thing you want to do. You're going to think that I'm playing fast and loose with the truth. You're going to think that I don't have your best interest at heart. You may even think that this is a money grab and I'm just trying to impose my will. You're probably thinking I'm being greedy. And you may even think that I'm being selfish. I'm going to throw things like that out there because I know that some of those things are probably accurate. And so I diffuse those before they've had a chance to speak them. The other thing it does is it makes you almost look like a mind reader.
Okay.
And it shows a certain level of selflessness and courage, because who actually does that? Who actually takes the time to point a negative light back at themselves?
So interesting, because sometimes I'm thinking, I understand your approach. And sometimes I wonder, maybe they're not even thinking this, but now I'm planting the seed.
And many people feel that way. You cannot plant a negative by mentioning it. If they're not thinking about it, you're not going to introduce it. It's like suicide intervention. We call ourselves hostage negotiators. The majority of the jobs that we did were suicide calls, people threatening to take their own lives. And if I've got someone who's showing some suicidal ideation, but I don't have a means or a method, our training is to go right at the issue. And I will ask, hey, are you thinking about killing yourself? If they're not thinking about killing themselves, my mere mention of it is now, they're not going to say, you know what, I wasn't, but now that you mention it, that sounds like a good idea. I'm going to go up to the roof. I'll see you on the way down. They're not going to do that. What actually plants the negative is when you try to deny it. When you say something to the effect of, I don't want you to think that I'm being greedy. Immediately, you're going to say to yourself, okay, he's trying to get over on me, because I started out by denying the negative. I said, I don't want you to think. I'm sure you've heard it in your lifetime when someone has walked up to you and say, listen, I don't want you to think I'm being a jerk. As soon as I say that, immediately you go to, all right, whatever's going to come out of his mouth next is going to make him sound like a jerk. And he's already started off by denying it. Now my defenses are going to go up.
So again, right now we're going back to the importance of the sequence, because you're trying to say the same thing, but how you say it makes all the difference in the world.
With everything, how you say it is 5 times more important than what you say.
Okay.
Your tone, your delivery, your cadence, your projected sincerity, your genuineness is all more important than any skill that you use.
And does the Black Swan group teach people to make sure, because if you have the best of intentions, but you are, like I often do, speak in an ineloquent way, and I'm speaking, giving voice to half-formed thoughts, and then I trip over them and I kind of screw up my delivery. This is something that we should prepare ahead of time, or with a little bit of practice, you know how to do this better.
Well, practice is always going to make you better. But the one thing to keep top of mind when it comes to tone and delivery is don't be offensive. Don't be offensive to the other side. The minute that you become offensive to the other side, by extension, the other side becomes defensive. And people become defensive when they are threatened. So in that conversation, you are a psychological threat. And as long as you are a psychological threat, we're not going to accomplish anything in the conversation, because I'm being viewed as a threat. So the bottom line is, when it comes to tone and cadence and delivery, don't be offensive. Be yourself, but don't be offensive.
Okay, I have a question for you. I was reading up about you and reading part of your book. One of the things that comes across very strongly is you're basically almost a life mission to teach people how to use tactical empathy to improve themselves, whether their personal life or their business. Can you expand a little bit on, say, some examples of how to apply tactical empathy?
Yeah, all right, so mindset change, first of all. Go into your conversations, and I don't care which conversation it is, personal or professional. The bottom line is, if either party in the conversation has I want or I need in their head, it is going to be by default a hostile conversation. Now, that doesn't mean that you guys are going to be at each other's throat yelling and screaming, but if you are proposing during our conversation that we change the status quo, and that's what a negotiation is, we're changing the status quo, you are now introducing work for me, work that is not there already. And that is going to make me defensive. And so you have to apply tactical empathy to break down that defensiveness. And it starts with the accusations audit at the beginning of the conversation. And then this idea of tactical empathy is more of a mindset than it is a skill. Keep top of mind, it's not about me. At least for the first 75, 80% of the conversation, it's not about me. It's about the other side. As Dale Carnegie said many years ago, interested persons become interesting persons. I want to be interested first, because I'm going to flip it around and force that interest back on me when I get to that area of my goal and objective. So this idea of applying tactical empathy is more or less a mindset. Put your goal and objective on the back seat on the back burner. You're going to get to it later, but let's talk about what's going on with the counterpart. An example, when my ultimate goal and objective as a hostage negotiator was to have him release the hostages and then put down his weapon and then submit to authority. That's my ultimate goal. I never led with that on my initial call inside the crisis site. I never called inside the crisis site and said to them, hey, it's Derek from the police department. My ultimate goal is to get everybody out alive. So why don't you let those hostages go, put your gun down and come on out. Okay. Even though that's where I wanted the conversation to end up. And I never led with that because I hadn't taken time to demonstrate for the person on the inside that I understand where you're coming from. This is not agreeing with them. It's not even liking them. And it's not feeling what they feel. You know, this idea that you need to walk in another man's shoes. I understand where they're going with that thought. But the reality is I don't need to feel what you feel to demonstrate an understanding what you're going through. So instead of walking in your shoes, I just need to see through your eyes. And the better I'm able to do that, the more likely you're going to return the favor to me when I get to my goal and ultimate goal and objective, or my ask. And so this idea of applying tactical empathy, it occurs throughout the entire conversation. Starts with the accusations audit, then I'm going to provide a brief summary. Why are we on the call today? And then after I complete my summary, you're going to hear me defer and subordinate myself to my counterpart with a simple question: what did I miss? So after my summary, I turn the conversation back over to you and say, what did I miss? Now you may say, no, that's it. You got it. You didn't miss anything. But the mere fact that I turn the conversation back over to you sends a subtle message that I'm as concerned about your position as I am my own.
And I guess that creates an environment of trust that you truly are trying to understand before you're trying to make yourself understood. And if how does I can understand this in the negotiations where, you know, maybe there's a deal at stake, but when you're in a high pressure situation or in an argument that you didn't even know that you were a part of, and all of a sudden you're like, how did I get into a difficult conversation? Diffusing this is really important. And I can't think of a better way to make sure that at least you're focused on solving the problem or understanding the other side, so that you can create, you know, a situation where you're trusted, that you're really trying to feel the other way, understand where the other person's coming from. And
that's the fastest way for you to build rapport. And to your point, you need that rapport to establish trust-based influence, because if you don't have trust-based influence, you're not going to encourage them to change their behavior, whatever that behavior is. And it doesn't matter what conversation you're in, if it's personal or whether it's business, because the skills that we espouse, the ones that came from hostage negotiation, we refined, and we're continuing to evolve the content, is based on the human nature response. And that human nature response dictates that negative emotions and negative dynamics drive decision-making and drive behavior. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner you put yourself in a position of advantage, because now people start to become predictable. You can start to predict what they're going to do and what they're going to say next, because you understand that baseline human nature response.
what do you think is the biggest challenge when you're trying to deal with negative emotions in a tense situation?
Keeping yourself in check. You're going to get triggered in these conversations. What you do after that trigger is of monumental importance. Do you fight? Do you flee? Or do you make friends? And so we are obviously in support of making friends. Now, this is not to say that you're not going to get triggered in these hot conversations, because it's impossible for you to not get triggered. But as Viktor Frankl said so many years ago, in between stimulus and response is a space. And in that space, you can choose how you're going to respond. One of the mantras here at the Black Swan Group is curiosity, curiosity, curiosity. You need to go into these conversations assuming that you don't know it all, assuming that as a result of this conversation, you're going to learn something that you do not know now. And I do not care how long the relationship has been with this other person. It could be a 10-year relationship, it could be a 20-second relationship. But in all of those conversations, you need to go in with an idea of, I have something to learn. I'm suspending judgment and I'm going to learn something as a result of the conversation. And so if you stay curious, it's impossible for you to respond to the trigger and stay curious at the same time. You can't be angry and curious at the same time. You can't be frustrated and curious at the same time, because your brain, it just doesn't work like that. You have to choose one or the other.
And if you're in a situation, Derek, when you find that your, I guess, adversary, the person you're talking to, is engaging in extreme hyperbole or just outright lying, how do you authentically know and stay curious when you actually understand, say, there's either a fact of something that they're saying is completely wrong, and you try to check yourself with the urge not to correct them, but what they're saying and the basis for their argument are lies? How do you manage that?
All right. So let me be clear about something. The idea of tactical empathy is predicated on your ability to subordinate yourself to the other side, to defer to the other side. That does not imply that we intend for anybody to be victimized. I'm not going to have my character impugned by anyone. So if someone is going to call me a liar, I'm going to make them provide me evidence as to what led them to that conclusion. And so the simple way, the easiest way for you to confront that is one of my favorite go-to labels. All right, so let me be clear. The label is the recognition and articulation. It's a verbal observation of what the other side is giving you. And the structure of the label is, it looks like, it seems like, it sounds like. If you want to sound more engaging, you can drop the it, replace it with a you. You look, you seem, you sound. And so if I'm confronted with someone who's going to attack my character by saying that I'm lying, whether implicitly or not, I'm going to simply say to them, it sounds like you have a reason for saying that. And I'm going to throw it back to them. Give me the data that supports you hurling that type of invective in my direction. Many of these people will do that because it bears them fruit. Why does it bear them fruit? It's borne them fruit in the past because no one likes to have their character impugned. No one likes to look like they're playing dirty pool or using underhanded tactics. And when I'm accused of something like that, I get defensive. Why do I get defensive? Because the accusation is now a threat to me. And people will do all kinds of things to remove the discomfort that that threat has produced. And they will wind up violating best practices. They'll wind up compromising in ways that they have no business compromising, just to have their comfort level restored. So in other words, the counterpart is using it as a tactic to get what they ultimately want, because they're betting on you responding like that. They're betting on putting you into a space of discomfort that you will do anything to get out of. And that usually winds up you cutting prices, taking things out of contract, doing work beyond the scope of the contract, etc., because you don't want to be viewed as being a thief or a liar or being unfair. In fact, one of the accusations audits, the preemptive labels that I throw out in almost every conversation, is the accusations audit that deals with fairness. So you and I are going to start talking about X. I want X. You want to provide me X. I just don't want to pay the price that you want to provide me X at. And so I'm going to get into before we get into the meat of the conversation, I'm going to say, look, before we get into the heart of this, I want you to know that as we push through this conversation, if you hear something that you think is unfair, I want you to stop me. And we're going to rewind that conversation back to where the unfairness began, and we're going to pick it up from there. And that is my message to the other side, not to use that concept of fairness, because that's an integrity play, not to use that concept of fairness against me as we push through the conversation. I'm taking it off the table. I'm neutralizing it. I'm de-weaponizing fairness, because I know people use fairness to try to manipulate other people. And this goes for you and everybody listening to this. If during an initial conversation, you guys haven't started really talking about anything, and early in that conversation, your counterpart says, hey, listen, before we get started, I want you to know I only want what's fair. You better protect your neck, because they're going to try to slit your throat at the earliest opportunity. Anybody that throws that out there at the beginning of the conversation is setting you up. And so to prevent that setup, I get out in front of it.
So if they try to bring up, you get out in front of it. Sorry, this is where I'm getting to the sequencing of conversation as well as sequencing of words. How do you get in front of it if they want to bring that up at the beginning of the conversation?
I get out in front of it before they even say it. So when I'm going through my accusations on the list, and they stop the accusations on the list, and they say, hey, listen, I got a lot of things to do today. Let's get down to brass tacks. I want to be mindful of your time. Listen, at any point during this conversation, if you hear anything that you believe is unfair, I want you to stop me, so we can rewind the conversation back to where the unfairness began, and we will pick it up from there. Okay. And I just leave it. And now that's percolating in their head, because I say this to you today, and this afternoon it'll probably happen. I have never had somebody tell me that they've used that accusations audit, and then midway in the conversation, the person said, you're being unfair, and I'm going to rewind you back to where this unfairness began. They can't do it. And that is a monumental tell, in that they were using it for manipulative purposes.
Okay. And one of the things that keeps coming up for me is the sequencing in trying to getting it right, because the importance of sequencing, as we said earlier, really does make all the difference in the world. Is there any examples that you can share where people are doing it wrong and you should do it this way in terms of, negotiating?
Well, and generally speaking, is what I said earlier. We want to go into the room, we want to pitch, we want to explain, we want to provide all of our data and information that backs up why we came to the conclusion that we came to, why we're asking for what we're asking for, and then we make our ask, and we get pushback. The proper sequencing, generally speaking, 30,000-foot view, tactical empathy first, then you explain, then you pitch, then you make your ask. So specifically, sequencing the conversation, I'm going to start off with a summary. It doesn't have to be war and peace, just a summary. The purpose of our getting on this call today was that we're going to discuss X, Y, and Z. We've talked in the past about possibly partnering together, and this is just another step in feeling out whether or not you and I are the right match. What have I missed? I'll give you a chance to fill in any holes. I'm listening to see what holes you fill in, what you think I missed, because those are of extreme importance to you. I'm going to need to file that away for later in the conversation. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to hit you with the accusations audit. Your accusations audit list is going to be dependent on the circumstances. You've got time to prepare for this conversation, then you've got time to prepare an accusations audit list. And you should make a comprehensive list of all the negative opinions, assumptions, or impressions that the other side has about you, has about the conversation, has about their environment, has about what you represent. Whether they're sane or insane, fair or unfair, it doesn't matter. If your thought process should be, if I was him, what would I be thinking about me? And you want to be robust in the generation of that accusations audit list. If you come up with 17, your mindset should be, I'm going to go through all 17 of these at the beginning of the conversation. Now, that's your mindset. The reality is you're probably not going to get through them all. The reality is the other side is either going to say, hey, A, I wasn't thinking any of those things, or B, I got other stuff to do. Can we get down to brass tacks? I had a client of mine record a discussion she was having with a real estate agent, and she's going through her accusations audit list, and he stopped her after about 7, and he said, this is the longest preamble to a low bid offer that I've ever heard in my life. and I only bring that up because usually the other side will stop you and tell you to move on, which is great, because now the conversation moves in the direction that you ultimately want it to go. And guess what? It goes back to tactical empathy. It's not your idea, it's theirs. So you're ceding control of this conversation to the other side, or at least that's the impression that you're giving. And so my next step is going to be label. Sounds like you have a vision for what this partnership is going to look like. That's just basically asking them, what are you thinking? I use the word vision specifically because it turns them into a narrator of a movie that's already played in their head. And you're probably going to get a more frank response when you use labels, when you use the word vision inside that label. And I'm going to be listening. I'm going to be listening for black swans, little pieces of information that, if uncovered, can dramatically change the course of the dialogue and ultimately the result. I'm going to label, mirror, paraphrase the negatives that I hear. I'm going to label, mirror, paraphrase the positives, the things that work for me in that response. And then the next step would be a no-oriented question. A no-oriented question is a question that we ask where we're not trying to get the other side to say yes. We're trying to get them to say no. Why is that important? Because a no-oriented question, when you allow someone to say no, you provide them with a certain level of autonomy and protection. No is always safety and protection. Yes is always obligation and commitment. And I'm continually amazed at what people will agree to when you allow them to say no, as opposed to forcing them for a yes, especially in the sales environment. The salespeople have all been trained to get yes, 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 yes out of the other side. We are yes addicted, and we are yes battered. We love to hear it. We hate it when it comes out of our mouth. And so with it's not a heavy lift, if you will, to change any yes-oriented question into a no-oriented question.
These are like, are you opposed to, or would you be against?
Yes, exactly. Are you opposed to? Would you be against? Is it a bad idea? Is it ridiculous? How bad of a position would I put you in if? Those are examples of no-oriented questions. So I'm going to ask a no-oriented question. Would you be opposed to me walking you through what I was thinking? Now I'm asking permission. Let me share my vision with you. Again, deferring to the other side, getting them to say no. As soon as they say no, go ahead. That's why we're here. I'm going to hit them with 1 or 2 more accusations audit. This is probably going to catch you off guard. You're going to think this is the worst idea ever. When I'm done, you're probably going to want to reach through this screen and stab me in the eye with a pen. Now, I get playful with that and illustrative with that because I want them to go to the far end of the fear spectrum so that whatever comes out of my mouth is going to pale in comparison to what they were thinking about. Here's a perfect example. When I travel, I get to the destination city often 2 to 3 hours before, quote, allowable check-in, which means I got to check my bags behind the counter and then walk around the city for 2 hours until they're ready for me to take my room. Or in some hotels, they want to charge me a ridiculous fee for checking in early. And I'm not inclined to do either one of those. So I make a situationally insightful, intelligent guess about the environment I'm walking into. And I walk up to the counter, and the first words out of my mouth are, I'm about to make your day that much more difficult. And I let it sit. I don't say another word. I'm just watching the reaction. Their reaction is, oh my gosh, here it comes. They don't know what I'm going to say next. They don't know if I drove my car into the swimming pool. They don't know if I've got 20 pounds of drugs in my luggage. They don't know if I just committed a goat sacrifice in the parking lot. They're thinking all of these crazy things. The second thing out of my mouth is the actual accusations of it. You're probably going to think I'm another needy traveler who believes that you're supposed to bend over backwards for everything I asked for. And now the color is draining from their face. And then they're not even making eye contact with me now. They're just staring at their computer keyboard. And then I follow it on with, how bad of a position would I put you in if I asked to check in early? Now, with the setup, they went to the far end of that fear spectrum. They have no idea where I'm going. And when I ultimately get to my ask, because they have conjured up this monster in their brain, my ask pales in comparison to what they were thinking about. And they can't wait to check me in early. In fact, more often than not, I get upgraded to a suite. That's how much relief they feel because of the way I set up the ask before I actually made the ask. So I'm going to set up my ask with a couple of my vision with a couple of accusations on it, and then I'm going to plow through. Now it's my time to pitch. Now it's my time to explain. Now it's my time to provide data and evidence to show why those accusations audits that I threw out at the beginning of the conversation, now I'm going to provide them with data and information that is clear, makes it clear they don't need to worry about those things.
Got it.
So that's ultimately the sequencing of the conversation.
Also, I've seen a few I guess videos where you're going through I don't know, it's a clinic, a workshop with some companies. And one of the things that I found was very fascinating was the power of silence.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can expand on that, because I do know that ever since I read the books, yours and Chris's, the ability just to be quiet after a quick question where everybody, I think, is desperately wanting to fill that void is actually quite powerful. Mm-hmm. But it's still uncomfortable as heck for me. So I don't know if you can expand a little bit on that.
All right. So all of the skills at the Black Swan Group are counterintuitive. They fly in the face of everything that you've ever been taught before. And so that's what makes the use of the skills uncomfortable. You have not been conditioned to shut your mouth. You have been conditioned to talk. And I'm not trying to insult you, but that's the way most of us have been conditioned throughout the course of our lives. Was when we're in a conversation, if I fall silent in the conversation, it'll give the impression that I don't know what I'm talking about, or I'm struggling for an answer. And it makes me uncomfortable. And it's uncomfortable because you haven't done it often enough. The discomfort and the awkwardness that you feel with any of these skills comes from the fact that there's no neural pathway in your brain developed for the skill. There's no cognitive map. When there's no cognitive map, your brain has to work harder. When your brain works harder, it hurts. We'd rather not hurt. We are creatures of comfort. We want to be comforted or comfortable for as long as possible. So this idea of dynamic silence is not one that you struggle with alone. In theory, should be the easiest of the skills to execute. In reality, it's the hardest. But the power of it that you alluded to cannot be overstated. You're providing room within the conversation for a thought process to take place on both sides of the table. You're providing them with the illusion of control in the conversation while you maintain the upper hand. As uncomfortable as you are with the silence, the other side is likewise uncomfortable. And so this idea of dynamic silence is you intentionally creating a void in the conversation after saying or hearing something of significance. Let it sit. 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. That's the average that you'll have to let it sit before the other side jumps into the conversation. Now, notice I said deliberately creating a void in the conversation. You know it's deliberate when you start counting. And as you're counting, if you eclipse 3 and you start to get closer to 10 seconds and they still haven't said anything, curiosity, curiosity, curiosity. What are they telling you by not saying anything? They're telling you that they're still thinking about something has confused them, or they have a problem with it. And so once I get to 9 or 10 and they still haven't jumped into the conversation, I think to myself, uh-oh, I'm failing to be sensitive to something that's really important to them. And that's what I usually use as a label to break the log jam. And I'll just simply say, once I get 10 to 11 seconds, I'll say, it seems like I'm failing to be sensitive to something that's really important to you. And that usually is enough to jumpstart the conversation. Now, having said that, the longest that we've ever counted was 12 seconds. Lex Friedman interviewed Elon a couple of months ago and asked Elon a question and didn't say anything else. And that dynamic silence stayed for a full 22 seconds before Elon responded to the question. Now, situation drives your strategy. You have to know who you're dealing with on the other side. Elon Musk is a hyper analyst. He's a very contemplative individual, which means he's thoughtful. So a 22-second silence for Elon is nothing because he's formulating the thoughts on how he likes to respond. So you have to know the personalities of the people that you're dealing with on the other side. But generally speaking, 12 seconds is as far as you'll have to go. If you get to 10 and they still haven't said anything, there's a problem.
Derek, one of the things that made me laugh on when you're saying this is years ago when I was still early in my career, there was a man who was an absolute genius with the networks. I used to work for the central bank in New York. And this man, everybody would turn to him for really complex problems. I was still very wet behind the ears, just out of college. And this man would get extremely pensive, close his eyes, and in mid-sentence, he would just stop. And everybody was kind of leaning in to wait to hear what he had to say, because he would wait. It was a pregnant pause, and to me, it seemed like an eternity. It might have been only 10 seconds, but it could have been 20. And then he would continue, and everything he said just seemed brilliant. Even if it wasn't, it just seemed like it was really brilliant. And then it turned out years later, I discovered the man had narcolepsy. And he could fall asleep standing up. But it turns out the guy was incredibly intelligent. There was no question about that, but it just seemed to emphasize it that much more.
That's interesting.
And then the other thing I wanted to, I'm very sensitive to your time. The importance of creating an inclusive, environment. Are there any quick tricks that you think people should learn to do in terms of, maybe a mindset, as you're talking about, to get them in the right frame of mind for a negotiation, maybe the one that they were not prepared for or didn't expect to have?
Yeah, well, I mean, for those that are listening, it's going to sound like a broken record, but just take a step back and say to yourself before engaging in this conversation is not about me. It's about the other side. And you tap in to that innate desire that I spoke of earlier. Everybody, I don't care where you come from, what you look like, everybody wants someone else to understand their perspective. And once you do that, now it's going to be easier for you to influence them into doing what you need them to do, because you first demonstrated that you understood what the impact is on them. That's all people are asking for. They may not like what you ultimately ask of them, but they do it more willingly because you first took the time to demonstrate for them that you understood what the impact is going to be on their environment. If you're a team leader, and I don't care if you want to make an ask of your team, you're contemplating moving the water cooler from one side of the office to another. If you have multiple people on that team, and I guess that's what constitutes a team, the chances that somebody's going to have a problem with that is real. And so before I make the ask of the move of the water cooler from one side to the other, I'm going to demonstrate that I understand how this is going to impact them. And now I've got people volunteering to help me move the water cooler from one side of the office to the other. They may not like it, but they're doing it willingly and not because you told them. And when creating these inclusive environments, it's important for you to understand how everything that you do and say, especially if you're a leader, is going to impact them. The second thing I would say to create that inclusive environment is trust your people until they give you a reason not to trust them. And I'm not talking about in an integrity sense. I'm talking about job performance wise. You tell them what to do, you train them up, and then get out of their way. You want to dampen or damage motivation within your group, your organization, your team. Get down into the weeds with them and start micromanaging everything that they do, and watch how many of those people, many of them will leave, but worse off, some of them will leave and not leave. They'll just check out. And now they're just collecting a paycheck. And because they've said to themselves, well, boss, since you're going to second guess and do everything yourself, why should I put in the effort? Because you're just going to change everything. So you show them what to do, train them up, and then move out of the way and let them do their job until they give you a reason to intervene. Now, I'm not telling you that micromanagement is 100% evil, because let's face it, there are some people within your organization that you have to check their work. You have to look over their shoulder. You have to ask them repeated questions. Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? And that's not because you are being a jerk. That's because based on their previous performance, they've demonstrated a need for that closer scrutiny. But many people in leadership roles think that is the environment 100% of the time, and it's just not. So as a boss, as a leader, you want to create that inclusive environment, demonstrate for them that you understand how they view things and the impact of whatever it is you're going to ask has on them, and then stay out of this micromanagement mindset. And that micromanagement mindset is usually born out of the fact that they're insecure in their own right. The managers, the bosses, the leaders. Some of them might be, in the book I mentioned blue flamers, those people who get promoted rapidly within the organization, and they're spending less and less time at one station in their professional life before they move to the next one. And therefore because they get promoted rapidly, they haven't gained a lot of institutional knowledge. They look at themselves as being viewed as incompetent by everybody around them. And so they overcompensate for that perception by getting their hands dirty. And you get promoted from level A to level B. You're uncomfortable in level B. People are looking at you going, do you deserve to be at level B? You know that, and that's what drives your behavior. Number two, you're unfamiliar with how you're supposed to respond at level B. So what do? You go back to doing work at level A, and that's not your job anymore, but that's where the comfort level is. That's where you spend your time. But the problem with it is that you're damaging the motivation of the people that work under you. And ultimately it's going to cause a systemic problem within the entire body.
Okay. This is all fascinating stuff, Derek. I wanted to ask you this, two questions, and I will leave you alone. I really appreciate your time. First one is, for somebody who's an expert negotiator like yourself, what is the biggest challenge in your line of work? What poses the biggest risk for you being able to put into effect what you're telling us?
Instruction wise, or for my previous life?
Well, I guess no. Currently, what you're doing.
Um, the challenges that I face as an instructor are, the bottom line is, people that come to us, the majority of them have been doing what they've been doing for many years. And as a result, there are many bad habits that have been developed. And oftentimes they don't view them as bad habits because those habits have worked to put money on their table, or food on their table, money in their pockets. And so they come to us with, what are you going to teach me, cop, about sales? I've been doing sales since dirt was young. What are you going to tell me that's going to improve what I do? Because I'm already making top dollar. And so that's a big hurdle for us to try to navigate, to get them to see a different way of thinking. And I'm always in agreement. Yes, you are making money. Yes, you have been successful. You're not making as much money as you otherwise would. I can guarantee you that. So think about that, how much money you're leaving on the table by conducting yourself in the way that you're conducting yourself. And so the analogy I like to use is, there's a lot of barnacle on their hull, and it's going to take a while to scrape that barnacle off to make them more streamlined in the water. So that's probably the biggest challenge. The other big challenge is what I mentioned earlier. This is counterintuitive stuff, and it flies in the face of everything that they've learned in the past. And because of that, there's a certain level of uncertainty about whether or not the skills work. And that's where a lot of pushback comes in, because they're comfortable in their ways. But I promise you that, first of all, I try to let them know, I don't want to change you. You are who you are. I'm just trying to enhance what you do to make it better. Just consider the Black Swan method. You've got a toolbox of all of your sales tools. This is just another section in that toolbox that you can draw from that will make your life better. And when I say life, I don't just mean their professional life. I'm talking about their personal lives as well. We get more and more feedback from people saying, I've been employing your stuff for the past couple of years. I'm making money hand over fist. Couldn't be in a better spot. But I tell you, I was not expecting the impact it was going to have on my personal life. I've had people fly across the country just to thank us in person, because not only was she making more money, but a relationship within her family that was in the toilet for 20 years got repaired because of the way she approached conversations with this person after the fact. And she's relaying this story to us in tears. I've had people come to me, a specific real estate agent who was coming to us for real estate specific training, used it in her personal life to snap a log jam, or to free a log jam, I should say, relative to her immigration status. And she flew into one of our cities just to thank us in person, because we spent time with her on the phone on how to structure this conversation with customs and immigration officials. And all of a sudden, what they thought was going to take 2 years took 6 months, and she got her citizenship. And so that, for me, is more rewarding than improving someone's bottom line.
Okay, and then my final question: what can I do for you here in Barcelona, in Europe, for the Black Swan Group? How can I be?
Just spread the word, brother. Just spread the word. I think we're going to start to be more aggressive in our pursuit of partnerships across the seas. Obviously, we have a market over there that is untapped. So whatever you can do to spread the word, this podcast is a great step in that direction. Would be appreciated. And then, like I said, I have a feeling that sometime within the next 12 months, I will be in your neck of the woods, and then you're obligated to take me out for those tapas and beers that you promised earlier.
Absolutely, it would be a great privilege. Hey, thank you so much, Derek. And don't hesitate, if I can do anything in the meantime, even if you're not here, give me a call. I'd be delighted to help out.
Of course. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.